I'm your host, Sean Aaron, and welcome to Them Boys Inc. podcast. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices can be amplified as we share our transitional stories and many other issues that are relatable to trans men of color and our existence. This show is not only to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Them Boys podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium? Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. My next guest I had the opportunity to sit down with is Oscar. Oscar is a trained facilitator and organizer who has worked with different entities to help with their diversity and inclusion efforts. He is currently working as a senior marketing manager on HubSpot's community-led growth team. Within this episode, we talked about depression, we talked about mental health, relationships, starting a gay straight alliance in high school, and we even ended the conversation talking about addiction. So this is a really good episode, so stay tuned. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. Real quick, before we get started, I just wanted to issue a trigger warning. Things discussed within this episode may cause an emotional response, a physical response, even a nervous system response, or a visceral response. So first, make sure to take care of yourself. Give yourself the time and space that you need to process this episode, or maybe just pause it here, come back later and listen to it at another date or time, or maybe you can get a friend, a family member, or a loved one to listen to the episode with you in order to help support you through the episode. And the episode is starting now. Hey, welcome to Them Boys podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. And my next guest is a trained facilitator and organizer. And also he is currently working as a senior marketing manager. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here.
Yes, so definitely. Oscar, please introduce yourself.
So my name is Oscar. My pronouns are he, him. As mentioned, I'm a trained facilitator and organizer. I've done a couple different projects in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Right now, my day job is I work as a marketing manager at HubSpot, which has, been pretty great. My first kind of foray into the tech space. It's a really large company. But what I like about it is it kind of gives me the opportunity to be myself. And I went to that job, because their values, allowed me to kind of show up as who I am. And I think I needed to take a little time, from the facilitation space a little bit. I was doing that work a lot and it was asking a lot of me. And I think like all of us, we kind of need to measure like our boundaries around certain things. So I still do some of that work on the side, but I'm also really happy in my tech job as well. But yeah, no, that's a little bit about me.
Oh, nice. So where are you located, Oscar?
I'm calling in from Hartford, Connecticut. I moved to Hartford, Connecticut a year ago from New York City. It was definitely a culture shock. I moved as part of the job. But, I lived in Hartford for a couple of years in 2009, so I wasn't completely unfamiliar with it. And I'm equidistant from New York City and Boston. So, if I want to dip to the city at any point, I could.
Yeah. How's the weather there? Hartford.
Today it's a perfectly crisp, cool fall New England day. It actually is really nice outside, and I was ready for a break from the heat personally, so I'm not mad at it.
Yeah, that heat wave is no joke. It was sweeping across the country.
Right.
Yeah. So Oscar, the name Oscar, how did that name choose you?
I love that you said it like that. How did that name choose me? You know, I was reflecting on this because you know how Facebook does like those time hops, right? So in September, the beginning of September, about 13 years ago is when I changed my name, and I did it here in Hartford, Connecticut, when I had moved here and was living here for a little while. Um, so Facebook reminded me of that, and I chose like Oscar came to me. I don't, you know, what's so crazy is like, I don't know. It almost kind of came to me in a dream. And then once it was there, it didn't leave, you know?
Mm,
Like once the name Oscar impressed itself upon my psyche, like that was it. Like I didn't entertain really any other names. And, you know, my birth name, I thought about using like a masculinized version of my birth name for a long time, but really when I reflected on that, that was more for my family's sake and not even really for my sake. It was more like I wanted to make it easier for them versus actually choose a name
mm,
that was me. And then I thought about keeping my birth name or the masculine version of my birth name as my middle name to kind of, you know, again, really to appease my family. But Alexander is my middle name. And that kind of came to me too. You know, it really did kind of come to me almost like as a meditation. And I let it stay there. I didn't question it. I let
mm.
spirit kind of guide me on it. And I filled out that paperwork and I got that court order and I never looked back.
Mm. That's exactly why I say it like that. Like, how did the name choose you? Because often that's how it happens, right? We get these intuitions of things of like how we want to be and move in the world with our names. I know a previous guest was talking about their name and was challenging other trans-identified folks to not keep the same name, their birth name, to think different, to kind of like, choose a name that's really for you and not something that will make other people in our families comfortable.
Right.
So, Oscar, that just seems like a name to me that seems like something that deserves respect. It's like somebody that is, I need to respect somebody named Oscar for sure.
I do love that I don't really hear it that often, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't hear the name Oscar is like a generation before us almost, right? So
Yeah.
you don't really hear like people our age with that name Oscar. And then when my full name, Oscar Alexander Robles, like it definitely has a cadence to it, I will admit, you know, that I've come to really like. And you're not the first person to say that to me. Like, you know, like, oh, when I hear that name, I'm like, damn, okay, that name, okay. Like you're in the room. I'm like, yes, I am. I'm here and I'm in the room. And you know, I love it now. It really has kind of come to me, and I feel like it always was with me in some way, shape, or form, even before I actually changed it.
Mm. So tell us your transition journey from like beginning to like where you are now.
Okay, great. So from beginning, you know, I always kind of carried a masculine identity about me from jump, like from childhood. You know, I was quote unquote a tomboy. Um, I had a lot of male cousins. You know, I played video games, climbed trees, you know, played with super soakers, you know, like cops and robbers, that kind of activity. I was never about dolls. I think I had like one doll. Anytime someone tried to buy a Barbie doll for me, it was kind of like a no. So I had a little bit of those like, you know, quintessential markers or indicators of some type of gender variance from like a very young age. And like I wore like kind of men's clothing when I was in high school, you know, like I wore a tuxedo to my prom, that kind of thing. And at the time, you know, because I was a masculine presenting at the time woman identified person, you know, folks kind of put that marker of like dyke or butch onto me. And I carried that a little bit into college and out of high school and into college. But it never really, that always felt like that was impressed upon me rather than actually did I choose that. But when I got to college, I met the first trans person I had ever known when I was in college. And she was a trans woman. She was the faculty advisor for my college's LGBTQ organization. And after kind of talking with her, just kind of getting to know her and hearing her experience, obviously it was different, but I could identify with the feelings, and after that, I kind of went online, and this was kind of in the age of like, leaving MySpace, entering LiveJournal type of, online presence, right? I'm dating myself a little bit, but that's where it was at for me.
Just a little bit.
Right. And I just started Googling, and just started reading and researching. And the more stories I read of other transmasculine people, the more I identified with it. And I started socially transitioning in kind of 2007, 2008. I cut my hair. I used to have kind of like really long, like Boricua, Puerto Rican, curly, thick hair. It was almost like a pride of mine for a long time. But I cut it and in line with my gender journey. And I had a couple of friends, like, I went back and forth for a little while. Like a lot of folks say like, oh, I don't see that for you. But like, what does that even mean? But like, but that jarred me. Like, my closest friends saying things like they don't see that for me kind of made me question whether or not I really saw that for myself. And I was very affluent and kind of, had leadership positions in my community as a butch lesbian woman, so I carried a lot of like social capital in that space. And so there was there was a question for me around like, oh, why can't you just be like, the butchest butch that you can be? Why do you have to be a man? Almost kind of like this like traitor kind of questioning around what I wanted to do with my identity. And so that kind of paused me for a little while. It was kind of slow for me in the beginning because of all these social pressures. Even within the LGBTQ community. And I would do talks like this sometimes to colleges or other groups around like gender identity and sexuality. And people would ask me, where do you feel like you get the most pushback or most kind of like angst or animosity about your trans identity? And I would say like within my own community, within the LGBTQ community, like people telling me like, oh, you're not trans enough, or you're not gay enough, or you're not whatever enough, like there are these boxes that people even ascribe us to, even within our own community. So I had a lot of strife in the beginning around that. I started taking hormones in February of 2009. And this was after an attempted suicide. So in July of the previous year, I had kind of come to the end of my rope around just like my own dealing with depression and anxiety, a lot of it related to my gender, a lot of it just related to just other things that were going on regards relationships, like I was in a long-term relationship, and my partner at the time, she said, like, if you transition, like, I'm a lesbian, so like if you transition, like this is the end of the relationship. And we had been together for a long time, and there's just like a lot of strife around that for me. But after I woke up in the hospital with that unsuccessful suicide attempt, I was like, well, I was meant to be here. And if I'm meant to be here, I'm going to be here as myself, as a person I want to be. And so I started making moves to transition. I started seeing a doctor. At the time, I needed medical paperwork to start hormones. Like now you can kind of go into a doctor's office and you can patient-informed consent start hormones. But when I started, I had to go through kind of like a more strenuous process. And it gave me a lot of pause too in the beginning, because I didn't want it to be documented that I had some sort of like mental disorder, and that was what it was 10, 15 years ago. In order to access certain care, you had to ascribe to having gender identity dysphoria or something along those lines in order to start your transition, which gave me some hesitancy because I didn't want that like on my medical record. Like, what if I wanted a job with the state or to adopt or something like that, in which those kind of medical records could show up negatively. But I put that to the side, and I had a really great therapist who wrote a very well-worded letter so that I didn't have anything like that on my medical record. And I started taking hormones, and I first did kind of like, intravenous shots, not intravenous, but like intramuscular shots. And a friend of mine gave me my first shot, another transmasculine person who I went to college with. And it was very kind of like a camaraderie type of moment, like a brotherhood type of moment for him to give me my first shot. And I had top surgery in July of 2011. I kind of never looked back since then. Like I haven't had any other surgeries. I don't have any other plans to have any other surgeries. When I moved, at the time I first started hormones, I was living in Florida. And I moved to Hartford, Connecticut the following August. So kind of, the following August after I first started hormones, right? So I started hormones in February. I moved to Hartford, to another state, that August. And it was very, as part of my gender journey, it was a really powerful moment because I moved to an area where nobody knew me, but I had gained some of those secondary masculine characteristics like a deeper voice, facial hair, body reconstruction, right? I didn't have top surgery yet, but like I showed up in the room and people saw me as the man that I always saw myself as. And I got that kind of social reflection, that mirror reflection back to me. And it was a blessing at the time, and now like it's interesting because like now like I don't it was for so long such a big piece of my life, and now kind of it's 13 years later from that first shot, and I feel so much more comfortable in my body, so much more comfortable just like in my personhood. I have these little moments here and there where, because I have passed so quote unquote well now, and I put all of that in air quotes, pass in air quotes, whatever, like that's, I don't actually ascribe to that, but people see me as a man, right? Like they don't question that. And so people don't know about my gender history. And sometimes it's a little bit like, it's a reveal. It is a reveal. And I have to decide if I want to reveal that or I don't. And sometimes that I have questions about, sometimes, am I showing up authentically or genuinely in this conversation? If I switch and I say, I played baseball in high school versus saying I played softball in high school, like some of that is just because I want to keep the flow of the conversation going. It's not about trying to hide anything. It's just like, I don't want to have to explain all of that. Just to share this one moment of, we both like baseball. We both like, this sport that involves a bat, it just, it's interesting now, 13 years later, but that's a little bit of my gender story.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I just real quick about what you just said about how you switch up the stories. I do that all the time. I play basketball and I play softball, and sometimes I do that when I'm talking to folks who don't know about my journey. I'll say, I play baseball. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard to actually shift the stories because it don't make sense. You know what I mean? So it's like, but do I really want to mess up this conversation, or do I just want to fake it till I make it time, kind of speak, right?
Yeah.
And just to go back a little bit, and I want to ask you, like, what does your support system look like? Because you said that to your prom, you went in a tuxedo. I wish I had the guts. I wish I had the support at that time when I was in high school to do that. So what does your support system look like in order for you to be able to do that?
So at the time, when I was a senior in high school, I had a younger sibling who was very sick. She was kind of in and out of the hospital for most of that year for me. And I lived with my grandparents, and living with my grandparents versus my mom and dad was helpful in regards to, I had some freedom and some autonomy in order to like move in a certain way. It was hard what was happening with my sister, but it did kind of shift the focus away from me. And what I was doing with my gender to kind of the care that she needed. And so I had some freedom, right? It was less eyes on me from my family, who at the beginning was not super supportive. They weren't part of my support network when I first started transitioning, or even when I first kind of quote unquote came out as a lesbian, like they weren't supportive of that. I come from a pretty conservative Black Caribbean family, and they weren't about that when I was younger. So I had some friends who were also gay, not trans, but gay. I had like two best friends who were gay men when I was in high school. And the three of us actually went to prom together, and they were super supportive of me, like didn't quote unquote understand it, but they were down, you know what I mean? They were down with kind of like my butch lesbian identity, which I carried when I was in high school. And like I also kind of had a little bit of like a boldness, almost like what might be like rebellious attitude about it when I was in high school. Kind of like, who gonna check me? Like kind of like angry teenager a little bit. I did kind of balance it somewhat. Like I wore tux to prom, but I wore a dress to my graduation. And I kind of did that for my family's sake, and in a way, like I got away with wearing a tux to prom because it was almost like prom was for me where graduation was for them, I like bit the bullet on that for my family's sake, and I didn't force the issue when I was graduating college because I kind of got what I really wanted, which was to wear a tux to prom. So that's what my support system looked like. I did have like a small group and I was part of the first, helping to create the first gay straight alliance in my high school in the county at the time. So like me, but mostly like other gay men. Like, there weren't that many queer people, trans people, or even lesbians like around at the time when I was going to high school. Most of my friends, my social circle, and my support network were other gay men.
So how did you start the alliance there in the high school?
A friend of mine, when I was a sophomore or junior in high school, a friend of mine, he was kind of coming out. When I came out as a lesbian at the time, right? I was always very visibly masculine, so I was visibly kind of othered. So a lot of times people would come to me and be like, "Oh, so like like I think I'm gay or I think I'm bi," because I was out in high school. So a friend of mine came to me and he's like, I think I might be bi, and I heard about this thing called Gay Straight Alliance. I think it might be useful here. Like, would you join me in like starting it? And I had a lot of social capital in high school. I was pretty smart. I played sports. I was part of a lot of clubs, like was in drama club, like, and all this stuff. So I had a lot of social capital with administration at my high school. And so did he, because he did a lot of that stuff too. So we had some friendlies in the administration who helped us get the club started on school. And first there was, they didn't like it. We had to meet, or we met like in this like shopping plaza that was like up the street from the school. And then kind of, again, I think connected to that like teenage angst, rebellious kind of attitude, we were all like, we're just going to storm the cafeteria and just host this club, and who's going to check us, and if you do check us, we're going to make us think about it, like, oh, you homophobic, we're going to like basically we were like kind of brazen with it, but we had some friendlies in the administration who gave us the cosign, and then we got a classroom, which was kind of like the official thing. We got assigned an official classroom to be part of the official part of the clubs of the school. But part of it was our boldness. And we also had mass. Like once we started it, because both of us knew a lot of different people in all these different groups from all these other social activities we did in high school, we were able to bring more and more people to us who just wanted to hang out with us, and just like wanted to be part of, like, be down with us. So we were able to kind of do it that way. Like our own kind of social capital within the high school helped us get the club started, because we were well liked. Like, I'll just be frank about that, right? Like there is something, like, I don't believe in popularity. I don't think this, I don't believe in it, but I think there was something at the time, there was something to being popular that helped me be out in high school in a way that was not harmful. Like I know that there's a lot of harm that some folks go through in coming out, or in kind of being queer, or being gender variant in some way, being trans. They encounter a lot of harm, bullying. I fortunately, I did not experience that. And I think I didn't experience that because I was somewhat popular in high school. And that's not like a flex or anything. That's just a part of my story. And so I used that popularity to get the club started with my friend who was also popular, and I think because of that, we were able to get off the ground.
What would be like your advice to someone listening right now? Maybe they're in high school, or maybe, they would like to start a club of that. I know you far removed from that, right? We're a little bit older now, and I don't know, things things kind of shift and move differently now. But what would be your advice to someone that's like, hey, I would love to have that in my organization, or love to have that at my school? What would be your advice?
Yeah, two pieces. One, who's your favorite teacher, or who's the teacher that you have a positive relationship with in the school? Because you're going to need, more often than not, you're going to need administrative support to start a club at a school. Like, and so who is within the administration, whether it's like a gym teacher or an English teacher, right? There's that meme that always goes around like when did you come out and was your favorite teacher the art teacher or the English teacher? Right? So there's a meme about that somewhere on social media, and I so like start with that person who you have a positive relationship with on the administration level, because you're going to need that buy-in at some point to make it an official club of the school. And then my other piece of advice is maybe it doesn't have to be an official club of the school. Maybe it's just you and a couple of people who are hanging out on the green after class and like talking about like, what you're experiencing and like building camaraderie in that way, and like kind of building like a sense of fellowship amongst your own peers. It doesn't have to be official. Like, it could just be like a group of people who are getting together to talk about their experiences and to find support within one another, to know that you're not alone. They could be, hey, like me and a couple of friends are getting Taco Bell after school. Do you want to come and hang out? And y'all are just, sharing space with each other. And it doesn't have to be a official thing. It started out like that for us too. Like I said, we would go up to the shopping plaza up the street from the school, and we would just kind of meet in like the little courtyard area and, just kick it. And then we started to do it after school, like in the cafeteria, because we were ready to kind of push some things, and we wanted to kind of try to make some changes to policies. So then we started like gathering at the school. But at first, just kind of started with us kicking it, hanging out. And this is all kind of pre-social media also too. Like, maybe another piece of advice is like, get off your phones and get into space, Like there's a lot of obviously opportunity to being able to organize on social media, but you can also like have a lot of benefit by just being in space with each other, like just sitting in a room with each other or sitting on the green with each other and just kind of, kicking it and talking and kind of being in each other's space. Like that would be my other piece of advice.
So being present.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Them Boys Inc. I am also the host of Them Boys Podcast. As you may know, Them Boys provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender-affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender-affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@themboys.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. You mentioned that you were in a relationship prior to you transitioning, and your partner at the time did agree with your transition and said, hey, if you transition, this relationship is no longer going to be. How did you move through that? I mean, outside of the harm, how did you shift your mind to move out of that of like, hey, maybe this relationship isn't for me, or maybe you're not the person for me? And how did you step into who you were and who you were going to be outside of that relationship?
I will say not well at first, like it did not go well at first. It was very hard. And for me personally, I had to do a geographical change in order to really, really get over it, So this ex that I'm talking about, we got together when I was in college, right? I was a freshman, she was a sophomore, and we were together for a couple of years. We went through a lot of different things together. We lived together for a long time. We had animals together, all of those kind of quintessential things of young love, young college love, right? Moved off of campus and into an apartment together, et cetera, et cetera. And, I struggled with it, and I had a hard time. And I think honestly, what got me over it was I don't recommend this. I'm just telling you, this is my truth, right, Sean? What got me over it was I got into a relationship with somebody else. That's got me over it. Like, and I don't recommend that. Like, that's not the way to go. Don't follow that, please. If you're listening right now, proceed with caution. Like, that's not advice. I'm not like standing for that. Absolutely not. No. And even though I was in another relationship, I still kind of was like back and forth with my ex. It was toxic. I'll be honest. I was the toxic one. I was the drama. It was me. And it wasn't until I left the area, I moved from Florida to Connecticut, that I really started to step out onto my own, and I really came into myself. And I had that physical distance, which allowed for emotional and mental space and emotional and mental growth to take place.
So do you and that ex, are you and still communicate with each other?
No, we don't talk. We don't. No, we don't. We actually have no communication with each other. Sometimes, every now and again, like something random will happen. Like LinkedIn will suggest us to be something real stupid, like real, like that's why the algorithms are never going to win. They don't understand context. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But something like that will happen. Or she lives in the area of Florida where my family lives. So every now and again, like my grandmother and my mom will be like, "Oh, I saw so and so at such and such," and I'll be like, "Oh, okay," just kind of keep it pushing. Like it's not. But no, we're not in touch.
So how, as the trans experience now, how do you navigate relationships now?
Yes. So I just actually got out of a 10-year relationship, which was also very hard, but with another trans identified person, which was beautiful in that regard. Like there is something to being with someone who understands your experience on a real personal level, because they go through it as well, or they experience it themselves. So I'm not in a relationship right now, and I'm actively, trying to do some self-work around that. How I navigate relationships, I kind of, been thinking about wanting to date again after some time from that relationship. And, how I navigate it is as best as I can in the moment, like it's like kind of like that double-edged sword a little bit too, like I was referencing before, where because I show up in, like when I walk into a room, people seem like, oh, here's this like masculine person, is this a man walked into the room, right? That's the beginning of the joke for me. A man walked into the room. And I say it like that as a joke because there's so much beyond that when I walk into a room. And I think something that's been unique or interesting for me to navigate is like, not only do I show up as like as a man, but I also kind of show up as what might be perceived as a like dominant or top of a man, like, so I navigate relationships and I look to enter relationships with other male identified people. I use kind of like the language like gay, queer, something around that. So when I seek out relationships, I'm seeking relationships with other men. So like when other men see me or approach me, they think that they're kind of going to get this like top daddy experience. It's actually,
I think it's the beard though. Maybe it's the beard.
Right? yes, that's what they say. And so it's so interesting, Sean, because sometimes like I'm just trying to be me, right? I'm just trying to show up as myself. And so I jokingly have said I'm looking for a blouse, and what I mean by that is a feminine top. So I started to think, I'm thinking about whether I should put that in my dating profiles online. But it's so interesting because now like I'm trying not to be on apps. I'm trying not to do it that way. Like the swipe culture is dead. I don't want to judge people based on their physical appearance in the same way I don't want to be judged based on my physical appearance. So I've been trying to turn it over to God, to my higher power. I've been letting my friends know, hey, I'm open if you want to set me up, like what's good, like they're trying to kick it old school a little bit, but the way I navigate relationships is just trying to be honest. Like I go back and forth between whether or not like I come out like in the first meeting or even before the first meeting, or if I try to get to know a person a little bit and then disclose. I've done it both ways, where I've disclosed before meeting someone and for a while that was kind of from a safety perspective for me. Like, I didn't know what other people's politics were going to be, so I was kind of pretty hesitant. But now, like, like as I mentioned, I just got out of a long-term relationship. So dating even now versus dating as a trans person now in 2022 is different than dating as a trans person in 2012. So now people have just much more of a vernacular or awareness of trans people or gender nonconforming people. And so it's less of a quote unquote shock or reveal. Like if someone comes out as trans or is trans, or you're in the dating world with other trans people, like we exist and we're more prevalent now than we were. Maybe, I mean, not to say that we're more than we were. We always were here. We've always been here. But I think the social vernacular around trans identities has become much more affluent in 2022 than it was in 2012. So, like I just try to be honest, try to be open. I try to feel out the situation. I try to meet people for who they are and let them meet me for who I am, and try to grow something organically and not like force the issue, and then just kind of feel it out from a safety perspective. Like if I'm getting to know someone and I feel like this is a safe person to disclose to, then I will. But if it don't, then I don't want to disclose. If I don't even think we're gonna vibe, then I'm not gonna tell you about my gender journey, or I'm not gonna tell you about my trans identity, because I don't actually think maybe we were not a match already on some other shit. Like, never mind the fact that I'm trans. Maybe we're just not a match because, you like blue and I like red, or something basic like that, so it's a journey. I will say it's a journey in and of itself. And I'm trying to be open. And as I mentioned, just like not press it too much. I know that the person that's going to be for me is out there. What's for me won't miss me, and trying to trust in the universe in that regard.
Yeah. So two things. So one, you said that you were in a 10-year relationship. And so in between time where being from a relationship and single, and before you enter another relationship, you're doing some self-work. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece of self-work that I'm doing and has been related to my recovery and being clean from drugs and alcohol. So like, something that I have acknowledged within myself and kind of come to terms with is just that I'm an addict, that I need to be in a 12-step fellowship. So I attend Narcotics Anonymous meetings on a regular basis. I've been doing that for about 18 months or so. And that has been a major part of my healing and a major part of kind of this space that I've been in, like, in between the end of my last relationship and now. Like, it's I don't blame the relationship. It's not my ex's fault. Like, there's nothing like that, but my addiction kind of got really big and unmanageable in my life during that relationship, and especially kind of towards the end of that relationship. And so something that I've been really focused on is my recovery, working with a sponsor, kind of working the 12 steps, as they say, and making that kind of like at the forefront of my growth, my emotional growth, and my spiritual growth as well. And then part of that, kind of part of addressing, my addiction is realizing that I suffer from addiction. I don't necessarily suffer from a drug problem. Like drugs are the result of an addictive tendency or nature that's in me, Mm-hmm. And something I've been learning is like, if drugs were the answer, what was the question? I'm trying to unpack that. I work with a sponsor, doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of kind of honest sharing with other fellows in Narcotics Anonymous and other people who are also in recovery, whether it's NA or AA or any other type of recovery program, just honestly sharing with them and building relationships with them, kind of be on this journey as together, because it's not an I program, it's a we program. We talk about that in the rooms, so. And part of that, in realizing it's not just the drugs, it's also food, sex, money, playing video games, like it could be anything, like anything that takes me outside of myself could become addictive, could be an exercise of my addiction, and so I need to really address things on from that perspective. I put the drugs down, but I could relapse on a relationship. I could relapse on binge eating, I could relapse on spending $200 at the Nike store, so I've been really kind of being honest with myself about how that shows up in my life. And part of that has been also my physical, addiction is addiction afflicts us spiritually, mentally, and physically. So I need to apply the principles of recovery spiritually, mentally, and physically. So praying more has been a big part of it. Meditation has been a big part of it. Eating well, going to the gym, journaling, reading, just kind of being applying those principles in all of my affairs, as they say in the rooms, where it's one thing to just kind of look at it from, okay, I'm not doing drugs anymore, but I want to live a different life. I want to live a better life. And so I got to put that work in on those efforts too.
Do you think there is a certain point within the self-work that you can be in another relationship with someone, or do you feel like you have to complete this self-work before stepping into another relationship with someone?
I don't think that there's no, I don't think so. I don't think that anyone is going to be, okay, I'm healed, ready to go. Like, it's not like that. Like healing is not linear, it's a cyclical process, and I don't think that you need to be alone to heal. I'm not alone to heal. As a matter of fact, I'm in the fellowship of other people who are also actively healing, and we're supporting and encouraging each other on our pathway towards more healing. It's not like you weren't healed and now you're healed. It's like, I'm healed to this point, and now I'm healed to this point, and now I'm healed to this point. It's like, it is a journey of like an onion, right? You pull back layers and you get to a new layer of healing. And then you pull back those other layers and you get to another space, right? And you do some healing work in this regard, and it opens up your ability to do some healing in another place, right? Because we can only address things to a certain point that we've been able to uncover them on a certain level. It's like there are some things, like right now, I feel like I'm dealing with I'll just say, I feel like I'm actually dealing with a lot of things right now. And my sponsor was telling me, he's like, it's because you're ready to deal with them right now. Like, you're equipped to be able to deal with them right now, because you have the program in your life. You have other people in your life who are here for you, who are supportive of you, like where maybe 6 months ago, I wasn't ready to address those things. Maybe 6 months in the future, I'll be ready to address something else that I don't even know that I need healing from, right? Like, it's a journey, it's a process. And I don't think that you have to be single in order to do that work. I think that there's levels to this shit, right? So maybe like I'm not gonna enter a relationship while I'm still thinking about my ex. I'm still talking to my ex. I'm still like text, like I'm not doing that, right? Like I'm not replaying that card that I did when I was in college, right? Where I told you that I got over that ex by getting with somebody else. I'm not doing that. It's so funny. My sponsor says to me, he's like, how do you expect the man of your dreams to show up in your life if your ex's car is still parked in the driveway? Right. I know, Sean. When he said that to me, I was like, well, damn. Like,
right. That just gave me goosebumps. Like, okay, you're right. Wow. Yes.
And maybe the man of my dreams is actually myself. And that's something that I've been like unpacking as well. Like, why do okay, so I feel like I want to be in a relationship, but why? I feel like I'm ready to be in another relationship, but what's the purpose or the goal, right? And really kind of not entering that because I want comfort or I want like someone to take care of me, it's not about that. It's like, I am getting to a place of self-love where I'm ready to share that self-love with another person. I'm ready to bring someone else in on that experience of me. And that, from that perspective, it's healthier. And I think it's more, I think I'm ready for it, But yeah, no, I don't think that you need to be, there is no such thing as a completely healed person. And I don't think that you need to be healed, quote unquote, in order to enter a relationship. I think you need to be self-reflective, and you need to be honest, and you need to carry a sense of self-purpose, self-love, and your own, like, you need to be it's like, I'm not looking for a 1 + 1 = 2. I'm one. I'm looking for another one to stand next to me, and we make 11. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
that's really what it's about for me.
Oh, I like that. That was good. That's really good. So you talked about looking for another man in your life. So dating men, that's something that I feel that trans men of color don't speak about enough, of being male identified and dating other men. You want to speak more on that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was having this conversation with somebody last night because she was all like, "I see you flirt with women sometimes," and I'm like, and I said, I'm interested in who's interested in me, and we were just joking, right? But I did say yes, but my preference is for other masculine identified people. I'm attracted to masculinity, and I think it's so funny because what I was joking about with her last night is I said I think men are harder to date than women, but I do find myself wanting to be in relationship with other men, and I do think that trans people, trans men, trans masculine identified folks specifically don't talk about that. I feel like it's almost like a what I have seen, what I have experienced, and I'll speak for me, right? Like when I was first transitioning, I felt like I needed to partner with a woman, a femme woman specifically, in order to validate my identity as a man. Like that, it was that signifier. Being in a relationship with a femme woman signified and almost kind of really kind of spotlighted the fact I'm passing so much that now I'm super straight, and I'm
Yeah.
so straight. I'm with this high femme woman that other men look at and it's like, oh well, damn, he's got it because he's got a baddie on his arm. Like it was actually not because I wanted to be with that person, or I felt like, I mean, I did at the time obviously want to be with that person, but there was an element of like social capital that was attached to it for me. And I think sometimes I see that in trans masculine people when they date, the way that they date. It's like they're dating for the social capital of it, and I think everybody does that. I don't think that's exclusive to trans people or the trans community. I think that happens a lot just in dating, point blank, period. But for me, like, dating other men, like I find it to be more comfortable. I find it to be just where my attraction lies. Like I have been with other women, I've been with other trans people, I've been with trans women. I've dated really kind of all across the spectrum, and that's kind of where I keep coming back to. And I know that he's out there for me.
I love that. So why do you think that a lot of trans men don't like to talk about it, even if they are? So say, hey, I'm attracted to more masculine people. I would like to date a man, but I'm dating a woman. Why do you think more people don't talk about it, or more people don't act on how they really feel?
Hmm. Well, I think a part of it is around there's still being a lot of stigma. I think there was a part of me in the beginning where it's like, damn, like I'm trans and I'm gay. Like, like I'm trans and I'm gay and I'm black. Like, like it was too much. Like there was just too much heat coming from all of the quote unquote whatever phobes, you know what I mean? Like racist, you're a homophobe, you're like transphobe. And I needed to dial it back in some regard. Like, and that was what it was for me. I think there was just like this stigma on top of stigma on top of stigma. And sometimes that's just a lot to emotionally carry, and so I think there's a piece of it, like there's, you almost don't want to be doing too much, like people like, oh, wow, you're doing a lot. Like not only are you black, but you're also gay. Not only are you black and you're gay, but now you're trans. Like you're doing the most, like, go sit over there somewhere. And I think people encounter that, whether it's overt, like in their face, actually really direct experiences of homophobia, transphobia, or racism, or they deal with it covertly, like even in the dating world. Like I've encountered men who be like, oh, like I would date you, but you're not a top. And I don't want to deal with whatever you got going. I don't want to like whatever, like scared of pussy and whatever. I don't know if I can say that on the podcast, but like,
Say whatever you would like.
but like I've encountered that. And I think that there's a fear of not being accepted, going kind of even back to your last question too. I think there's a fear of trans masculine people who, even if they are attracted to other men, cis or trans, that they worry about being accepted, about their bodies being accepted, and about like navigating sexual relationships in a way that feels pleasing and comfortable and actually whole. And I think there's something somewhat safer with being in relationship with women or with femme-identified folks. Like there's a safety there. There's like a sense of like ease with those relationships that I've personally experienced, that even though it felt easier, or it felt like more just less traumatic at times, it still kind of wasn't my flavor, but I was doing it because I didn't want to encounter some of those other things that I was encountering by men. And I will say by like cis men specifically, and some trans men too, like, like I said, trans men, like they're like, I got to be the manliest man I can be. So that means I'm going to be with a woman, and it's like, okay, well, do you over there. Let me know when you're done with that. Like, like, but I do think that there's the pieces to navigating relationships that are connected to your ability to pass in a cis het dominant world, and how much emotional weight that may be if you're doing something outside of that.
I think that's really good. I think that even me personally, I'm currently trying to navigate that as well, right? Like dating women all my life, but okay, well, maybe now in my life I'm attracted to more masculine people, or maybe I'm attracted to men or femme men, or like it's really hard to navigate. And just like you said, it's a lot. It's a lot to mentally process. You're like, okay, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. Damn, like, how do I process that? How do I explain this shit? It is a lot. And sometimes it gets to be overwhelming. But what advice would you give to someone that's trying to navigate that, of like from what they date to what they really like, and moving in a direction of happiness, really? Because when you're with somebody that you really want to be with, someone that loves you, appreciates you and your body and everything, what would you say to someone that is battling with that?
Don't settle. It's easier to, get some immediate piece of gratification, for sure. But like, that's not long lasting. That's not sustainable, so don't settle. And I'm speaking to the audience, but I'm also speaking to myself, because I'm going through this right now, like where I know that I deserve and I want, the filet mignon, the top shelf, but I'll settle for a McDonald's cheeseburger because I'm hungry, right? Like, no, like, don't do that to yourself. Like, don't settle for these quick fixes for actually what you want. What you want is a long-term sustainable relationship. Like, you're not going to get that in a one-night stand. Why do you keep repeating insane behavior over and over again when it's not yielding you a positive result? And I went through that, like, where I'm looking for that validation from men, right? So I'm on Grindr, or I'm on these other hookup apps. So, and I'm just trying to like get that. I'm trying to like almost prove to myself that I'm desirable by having and it's like, and that did damage to me on an emotional level, on a physical level too, if I'm honest. But that like did damage to me, and I'm unpacking those behaviors right now, and I'll happy to say that I have not engaged in those behaviors in over a year. And it's hard. Being alone is hard, but there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, and being able to understand and unpack those different feelings for yourself is it's helpful for you to understand and navigate your own emotional space. And think about, you wouldn't want someone to use you in that way. Why are you using other people in that way? So I also try to put it in that perspective, because there have been some guys who I've like dated or like hung out with, but I knew that it really wasn't moving towards a relationship, but I was only still continuing to see them because of the sexual gratification. And like, I was using him, if I'm being honest, right? And I don't want to be used like that. So I'm not going to participate in that behavior. I'm not going to perpetuate it. Really kind of lean into your social network around your friends and your family. I think we exalt and we put relationships, romantic and sexual relationships, on this pedestal that supersedes our friendships and our families, but that's like, why do we do that? Like, why do I say I have everything in my life except this. I have everything in my life, period. And I would maybe also like that, like if that's a different perspective, and kind of investing in my friendships and investing in my family relationships is also more sustainable and more long lasting. Like those friendships, those relationships, those are going to be there even if, I'm dating someone or I'm not. And investing in those relationships also invests in me. This is like my last piece of advice is invest in yourself. Like something I'm doing right now is like, I was in that long-term relationship for almost 10 years. And who am I? Like, what are my hobbies? Like, what are my interests? Like, what are my routines? Like, what are the things that I'm passionate about? Like, what do I want to do on a weekend? Like, what are the activities that I want to start to invest in? Why am I waiting for someone to send me flowers? I could send myself flowers, like, why am I waiting to visit a museum to check out that exhibit when I could, put on a podcast and walk through? I did that a couple of weeks ago, actually. And it was a great experience. Like I had my little podcast in, I walked through the museum at my own pace. I stopped and I read all the play cards that I wanted to read. I didn't have another person pushing me along or being like, I'm hungry, let's go. Like I'm dating myself, and that sounds really corny or that sounds like hokey or whatever you want to say, but there is a lot of value in dating myself and getting to know myself. So like when the moment arrives when that person arrives to my life, like I can really know and discern if that's a relationship I want to pursue, because I'm in such good quality, close contact with myself. Stop looking outside of yourself for the things that are within you. Everything that you need and want is within you. And all a relationship is going to do is help to amplify or to help to shine light or, provide maybe some companionship to an already whole person that you are.
So the moral of the story is don't settle for McDonald's cheeseburgers and get your ex's car out of the driveway.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So this is the part of the show where I love to ask the guests a random question. So I have a growing list of questions, right? The list is at 23 questions now. So I'm always coming up with something. Sometimes I wake up out of my sleep. I'm like, oh, that's a good question. And I'll add it to the list. So it may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today. So just pick a number between 1 and 23, and then I'll read you that question.
13.
13. Okay, this is actually not a question, but an action request. So tell us a joke.
Okay. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Little old lady.
Little old lady who?
Oh, I didn't know you knew how to yodel.
That was trickery.
It was my best dad joke of the year.
That definitely was a bad joke. Hey, Oscar, thank you for being a guest on the show. I really appreciate you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Sean. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Once again, I'm your host. My name is Sean Aaron. Be sure to be sure to share this show out with folks in your networks. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also visit our website at themboys.org. That's DEMBOIS.org. If you think you will make a great guest on the show, or maybe you have a question for myself or a future guest that you would like to hear answered on the show, please send an email to hello@themboys.org. That's HELLO@themboys.org. Until next time, take care.